Friends, welcome to the WILDSONS Podcast. This is Pablo, and today I want to invite you to join me on a conversation I had with my friend, my brother Sean Fye, as we together explore the masculine heart. Today our conversation is centered around masculinity and broken masculinity, but then around the possibility and the beauty of restored masculinity, all through the lens of Sean's story. I think you're going to enjoy it. Sean, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, my man. How are you?
All right. I'm doing great, too. I think for our listeners and viewers, I'd love to, to chat a bit about you and your background and how we met. And then we're going to get into a conversation on masculinity and on exploring the masculine heart. But first, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and maybe even how we met and how we got into this crazy adventure together.
Yeah, no, well, I think that's actually a great place to start and a great story. I was at a point in my life in my late 40s where I had kind of run into the end of myself, was looking for answers in my life, and had really started re-exploring my faith again, thanks to my wife. Our kids.
Can I ask you a question there? You just said that was in your late 40s. How long ago was that?
Well, I'm thinking it was 6 or 7 years ago, right?
Okay, so you were in your late 40s. Crap.
I was in my late 40s, not when we first met, but really when this shift started happening in my life. When the shift started, you and I met probably 2 years after that, I think. So
got it.
We've met probably 7 years ago now, I think. But I had this shift where I was really trying to find answers, right, that I had never had, and obviously things I'd been searching for a long time, probably my at least all of my adult life. And our kids, we'd been going back to church. Our kids were in Christian private schools. My wife had mentioned after a period of time that she thought it'd be a good idea if I got into a men's group. And I just didn't feel comfortable in any of those places. I have some of my story is a little rough. Some of my background's a little rough. And I just didn't feel like those were environments.
Just a little.
Just a little, yeah. So, but I didn't feel like I really would be comfortable sharing those stories, or that I would fit in those environments. They didn't feel super welcoming to me in that way. And maybe that even if I did mention those things, there was nobody there that could relate to what I was going through, or kind of maybe what I had been through. And at the same time, I had started doing some tactical training at a tactical center, and realized on their schedule that they had a Bible study on a Monday night. And I was like, well, hey, I'll go there, right? At least we're starting with similar backgrounds, like similar interest. And the first one I went to really was nothing out of the normal. It didn't really strike me as, something that was going to really help make a major shift in my life, or anything different than what I'd been experiencing on my own. But the second one I went to, you were a guest speaker there, and some of you had brought another couple guys from WILDSONS over there. And even from the very beginning, you were asking real questions, really, right? Like, what's really going on in your heart, right? And what do you really want? What's in the way? There were just questions that that are uncommon. They're simple questions, but they're uncommon. We went outside and stood around a fire for maybe 3 or 4 hours, I think, that night. and the men there, starting with you and some of the men that you brought with you, were sharing just super in a very vulnerable way, in a very authentic way, and that really struck me. Right, there was they were willing to drop their pants, if you will, and just be completely raw, completely vulnerable. And that I could relate to, right? That actually created for me a safe environment to be able to share my story and to be able to explore the things that were really going on for me. The funny part
Sounds like a big contrast between at least your perception of what a gathering of men would have been if you had actually gone to search for in the places where your wife had suggested, or the alternatives that you had at the time, versus the idea of a bunch of guys just being men around a fire with full permission to share about their stories, about their hearts, about how they were feeling and how life is going really.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't, who can tell the greatest story either, right? And one-upsmanship or anything like that wasn't going on. It was just people being very honest about where they were at, and what was going on in their life, and the things that they were struggling with, whether it was pornography or whether it was, substance abuse, whether it was dealing with anger around certain issues that were going on. It was just, things that we deal with as men that isn't talked about openly and honestly. That in certain places, it's talked about around the edges, right? It people touch on the topics, but people don't really go deep into those subjects and really own those subjects and admit to those things wholeheartedly. And really the true desire of what do you want? Obviously, I don't know anybody that wants to stay stuck in those areas. People want more than that out of their life, right? I did, and I believe everybody does, sometimes not knowing how to get there, right? And maybe feeling a little stuck and a little bit hopeless at times with some of the things, and the thought or the potential lie that they may never change.
Yeah, I love that you're actually bringing that up, because as we record, it is the transition from to a new year, and it's a season where at least some people have the guts, I would say, to sit down and think about what do I really want, which is something that surfaced in that gathering, and surface often where we are is in the moment that we create a space where men can share openly where they are. The thing that happens often is that we're opening for the possibility of, yes, I am here, but I don't have to stay here. There's got to be a way to more. There's got to be more to life. There's got to be more to me as a man. There's got to be more to my marriage than what I'm experiencing. There's got to be more to the way that I parent, or my calling and my vocation at work. There's got to be more than what I'm experiencing today. And therefore, the willingness to, number one, hear from others. Well, it's not that you're blowing it. I'm going through similar circumstances. This is where I am really. But together, maybe we can together fight and go after all that God may have for us in each of those areas, and begin just to fight for each other in a real, in an authentic way.
Yeah, and are there men that have found some success in doing that? Not from a short-term perspective, but really a long-term, meaningful perspective, right? And not that those issues were solved completely or never came up again, but they're beginning to have better understanding around where that's coming from. Maybe find some healing and some different interpretation around maybe why am I going through that? Why is that anger coming up for me? Why am I trying to find life through alcohol or sex or whatever it is? Why am I doing that? and what's at the core. And you and the group were asking those questions and beginning to dig at that, right? And I could tell that there are men out there that are wholeheartedly searching for those answers and committing to a journey that can take them out of that and into a much more fulfilled life with their wife, with their children, with their friends.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you had that experience. That was the first time we actually connected.
Yeah.
That's when we met around that evening, particularly around the fire, when we had an opportunity to chat and to exchange, words and connect with each other. And then since then you came to one of our events here in the mountains of Colorado. You came up to an event without knowing exactly what to expect. And
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Well, it was great. And I'll first say that first night, my wife thought I was dead, by the way, because I hadn't responded to any of her calls or texts for several hours. I was supposed to be gone only maybe for 2 hours or so, and it had now been 4.5 to 5 hours. And she knew we were out shooting guns and finds looks like my phone. I'm in the middle of some field somewhere and haven't moved for several hours. So, but she was happy to hear from me once we had kind of finished up. But, to your point, the second time we met, again, we had the same experience and really got to talk more about what was going on for me. And you invited me to one of your retreats, and I would have never gone to a 4-day Christian men's retreat before. I would have never said yes to that because I really, I would have had a hard time committing to be stuck in one place like that, maybe in a horrible experience in my mind, right?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I never attended a Christian men's retreat, and it's hard for me to put our events in that category, not
Right.
because there is anything wrong with Christian men retreats themselves, but because that has been twisted, and that and something that should be about life and passion and freedom and adventure and all the things that as men we were wired for, we are born for, has been sort of twisted into this, whether people realize it or not, this concept of Christian men are just nice men and who are really good at, I don't know what, helping people at the parking lot on Sunday morning, instead of, owning the wild nature of God in us, in our masculine hearts, and full permission to be who He created us to be. And so, when I think about our events, I struggled, because if someone had invited me to something like this, I would have likely said, not for me, buddy. Thank you.
Right.
But I pass.
Right.
Hard pass. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you actually had the cojones to say yes and showed up.
Well, I did because
how was that for you?
Well, I trusted in you.
Yeah.
Because of how you presented, and the authenticity that you had, the men that you brought with, I could trust in that. I think for all of us, our BS meters work pretty well. And, we know when red flags come up. And for me, I think most men, we're always scanning the situation for a potential threat, right? Or can I trust the situation? And I felt comfortable enough to say yes. I still didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I figured I would trust the experience that I had on those 2 occasions. And if that's what it was like, I wanted more of that.
Yeah. And you got much more, obviously. That event was pretty significant for you, if I remember correctly. And then since then, you've been now walking with us, and we've become really close friends and brothers for, you said, 6, 7 years now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm 57 now, so it's 6 going on 7
Young
years, I
pop.
think. Very young, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
no,
That's wonderful.
that I had a great experience there. Really, shined light on some things that I very specifically was dealing with, and allowed me to see things that I wasn't able to see in myself before, and that began the journey. So it really helped change the course that I was on, and
Oh,
really helped me start heading in the direction that I really wanted for myself, hopefully for my marriage, and all of those things.
yeah, yeah. And for me, I've had the honor to witness that shift over the course of the last 7 years. And the man that, I mean, you were already pretty deep in the path of searching for answers and looking for restoration and transformation. But what I've come to experience as your brother, knowing your story so well and having gotten to know you so deeply, it's just miraculous. And it's been an honor. And so, in light of that, because particularly I have come to know you and I know your story so well, and then I have seen the transformation and the effect that you have now, not just in the life that you live and in the passion that you live with and in the freedom that you experience as a man, but also the effect that now you are having on the people that you love, your wife, your children, us as your brothers, and in our community, the place of leadership that you have taken now within the WILDSONS community. I thought would be a great your story as a great point of reference for the topic that I wanted us to explore together today, which is the masculine heart. What we want this podcast to be is the exploration of the masculine heart, and so I'd love to start by asking you a question. We haven't rehearsed any of this; it's just open and raw, and however it is. So there are no right or wrong answers. But I'd love to start by asking you, in your own words, what is masculinity to you? What does it mean to be a man?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and I think it's shifted over the years. But initially, I come from a small farming community with a lot of really strong men, hard men. And so masculinity from the very beginning was kind of modeled as, strength, courage, the ability to do hard things. Unfortunately, it was relatively emotionless, right? But really able to shoulder a lot of weight and a lot of burden is really probably where it all started. And I still think a lot of those, because that was from the very beginning of my story, are still there.
Yeah, so I'm hearing in what you're describing a contrast. On one hand, words like strong and courage and ability to do hard things, ability to come through and to carry heavy burdens, and all those things. Like, as I'm hearing you say that, I want to be that man, right? I want to be strong. I want to be powerful. I want to be able to come through for others. I want to be able to carry a heavy burden if I have to, and accomplish whatever it is that I'm putting myself into. I think that that's a core to the essence of masculinity, to what it is. But then you said, and all of that was true, but in a context that was emotionless, almost as if emotion does not equal masculinity. Masculinity does not include the idea of emotions. Can you explore more? Can maybe give me examples? What would be emotions that were not allowed or that you never saw in your experience of men as you grew up?
Well, I never really saw anybody be honest about fear, right? Sadness, um, uh, just the pain of struggle,
Yeah.
right? The desire for more than what it was. I didn't see those things, almost like you had to shoulder that burden as well, right? And I think that that's maybe where the messaging goes wrong, is that if you're scared, right? If you have fear, that means you're not enough of a man, right? You should be able to shoulder that burden. If you're
Right. Almost like feeling fear equals being weak,
correct,
and men shouldn't be weak, therefore they shouldn't experience fear.
correct, and you know this, it was only in the last year or two that I could admit to myself that I was scared about something.
Wow.
And really be able to use that word, right? I'm scared. And that was the reality, is I was scared. But prior to that, what that meant to me is that that was weakness and that I had given up. And that's not true, right? It's not true. I can admit that I'm scared about the potential outcome of something. I'm not giving up, right? That doesn't mean I'm throwing in the towel, right? That doesn't mean I'm weak. And then having the strength to admit that now, right, is actually, I view that as a strength, and to be able to step into it, understand it, work through it, join forces. There's so many things that can come of that, but I think early on, those things just weren't allowed to be exposed for the fear, again, the fear of appearing weak or becoming weak, even becoming weak. I mean, when I was young, I was afraid that I wouldn't be man enough, right? For the people around me, or for the standards that I believed were out there in the community, or maybe from my father or my grandfather. I had a real fear around, maybe I won't be man enough. There was even a saying in our culture, and I don't remember the exact saying, but the essence of it was the saying meant you were a soft or a hairless man, and I couldn't wait till I was able to grow a beard or some chest hair or something that would prove that wrong, right? I didn't want to be a soft, hairless man at any cost, and I remember, in my youth, just being worried about that. Like, would I be enough?
Yeah.
Would I be enough of a man?
And would I be enough of a man, right? Would I have what it takes when it comes to bringing my strength and coming through, and when I am confronted with challenges in life, when I have to work and provide for my family, or where the health diagnosis shows up, will I be enough? Will I have what it takes to come through as a man? Yeah, I think that's a question that we all carry as men, whether we are conscious of the question or not. It's something that drives every single one of us as men. So that was your experience, though, of in this farming community that you grew up. Words to describe masculinity. You used words strong, courage, heavy ability to carry a heavy burden, but emotionless. As you grew up and you were exposed to maybe other leaders, you went to the military for a while, right? Early in your adult life.
Yeah.
What was your experience there? And as you maybe think about that season, what was your experience of masculinity?
Well, I was very young when I went in, and I think the military, just the perception of that, of a soldier, of anyone who's in the armed forces. Again, that word strength, courage, those words are repeated, right? Those are valued. They're revered in that type of setting. And, you have a lot of fairly young men that are trying to find out what the pecking order is, who's who in the zoo, and your question is, where do I fit into that, right? Am I on the bottom of that pile? Am I going to be taken advantage of, right? How is that going to work out? So again, I found myself probably in a situation where most of those things were just being amplified more than finding maybe a healthier interpretation around masculinity.
What do you mean? Like, what things were amplified?
Just strength, courage, fearlessness, the ability to do hard things, the ability to carry a burden, again, emotionless. There didn't seem to be room for that. And so, again, I think those early messages were amplified.
Yeah. And then when you think about earlier than that, and when you think about your dad, what words would you use to describe him as a man?
I mean, he was all of those things. He was successful. He was hardworking. He was a strong man. He was competitive. He was aggressive in his nature. But looking back on it, I think, some of that stemmed from fear, to be honest. And the inability to really voice that fear and come to terms with that and be okay with it.
Yeah. What do you think he was afraid of? What do you think was the root of that fear in his life?
Well, I still think it's probably, am I going to be enough? Right? Am I going to be taken advantage of? Trust issues. There's all of those things that when you internalize those really and don't get to, bring them out into the light, really discuss them and explore them. I think it's, it can eat at you a lot.
Yeah. Yep. I hear you. And then your experience of leaders, masculinity, or men in leadership places in the military over you, whether consciously or unconsciously, what words would you have used to describe them as a man? Or now in hindsight, as you think about them, what words come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were tough guys. They were self-reliant. They were hard. They were matter of fact.
Yep. Do you think that there was also fear in them?
Well, today I believe there's fear in all of us, right? And I think that shapes a lot of what we do and why we do it as men, right? And I think the fear allows maybe the broken side of masculinity to come out. And
I love what you're saying. I think, I think I can relate to that a lot. As you were sharing, that in your own story, it was making me remember some of the themes of masculinity in my own story. So if you know my story well, my parents, my mom left my dad with my sister and I when I was around 6 years old. And up until that day, there was violence, domestic abuse in the house. And so I think that words to describe my dad would also have been probably, as a boy, I would have described him as strong, intimidating, hardworking, committed to his work and his, vocation, whatever that was. But I think now, as I've come to know him or know and understand his story, and as I've grown up and be now even older than he was when I was little, I see the theme of fear in his heart, and I see the theme of fear specifically of what you're describing. Is, am I the real deal? Am I a man? Who am I? And then being afraid of not having what it takes, of not being man enough, of not being able to show up as a strong man, courageous, all these things that we're describing. And so it feels like his actions, even his violence against my mom, and the actions that he would take anywhere, where the motive behind it was to try to prove that he was a man from a place of fear that he would not be man enough. Make sense?
Yeah. And that others may think that he's not man enough, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. To be exposed as someone who is not man enough. And therefore I need to cover my butt, however it is. I need to show that I have what it takes. I need to show that I am tough. I need to show that I'm brave. I need to show that I have what it takes in whatever context of life I'm placed, but from a place of having that big question mark, having that doubt that I have what it takes. And so you use the word broken, which I think is key, and I would love for us to explore that a little more. There are attributes of masculinity that you describe, like strength and courage and ability to come through for others and carry heavy burdens and power. All those things, I think you and I agree completely that there are traits, masculine traits. Not that women don't have them, right? There are courageous women, that are warrior women, etc. Mm-hmm. But as we focus on the conversation on masculinity per se, strength, courage, and valor, and capacity to come through and to carry a heavy burden, those are things that we both believe are part of the essence of what masculinity is. But in the presence of fear and shame, then they turn into pressure. I need to prove that I am someone that I believe that I'm not. And therefore my expression of masculinity is broken. And so what we see today in the current culture, it's a broken masculinity. And I think that that's really important to mention, because in the current culture, masculinity is being assaulted, is being criticized. Masculinity almost means something evil, right? Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, and we always hear the word toxic masculinity, which I hate that
right.
phrase. I really don't care for that phrase, but it has been assaulted, and it's valid to be questioned in some of the ways that it's being expressed, right? And so, but I love the words you're using around being broken, or broken masculinity, rather than toxic. So, and I think it, for me, I know that came out a lot through aggression, right? And that could be towards anyone. To stand up against injustice, to stand up against a threat. But my ability to evaluate a threat properly, because of my emotional maturity at the time, I would act, it would come out in very broken ways, To give you an example, if my wife comes to me with an issue that, she may not be happy with how it was handled or the outcome, whatever. Early on, I saw that as a threat level 10, right? From 1 to 10, that's a 10, right? And that's a threat that I have to stand up against this threat, because it's threatening my masculinity, right? It's threatening
Correct.
Do I have what it takes? Am I man enough?
Right.
If somebody looks at me, somebody looks at me funny.
Yeah, what I'm hearing with the example of your wife, if she comes to you and says something, even though this is not exactly what she's saying, is almost like the message that you're hearing from her is, you see, you don't have what it takes. You're not a good husband. You're not able to come through in these ways that you should be able to come through. And therefore she's, without necessarily wanting to, right, through whatever it is that she's saying, what you are hearing is that you don't have what it takes and that's being exposed for the world to see. Right?
Exactly.
And therefore, obviously, you go to level 5 and like, heck no, I will prove you that you're wrong and I am right and this is why, and right. And so the aggression, I guess, and the strength and the power that you carry in your heart as a man is now expressed in the wrong way.
Exactly.
Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And it's just, the inability to assess that threat properly. My way to deal with threats of any kind was to get big, and so here I am.
Right. I will shut you down before you shut me down.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So using, that strength and that power and that courage, but in a very broken way, right? In a space where it's not needed, right? What's needed is the strength for me to be able to listen to what she has to say, honor what she has to say, and then be able to do something with that from that point forward. That's the strength that I want to have. Right. And as men, in all reality, we take up a lot of space in the room, particularly when, our broken masculinity comes out, is when, if I show up and I get large, right, and I get loud, that takes up a lot of room, a lot of space in the room. And everybody else in the room doesn't have the space anymore. I've taken that over. And I haven't given them room to express themselves, right? Or for them to find restoration or healing. And so, I have a long way to go still. I have work to do. I always will.
Yeah, we all do.
But my desire, right, is for me to be able to use my strength to acknowledge the ways that I'm showing up from a broken place, right? Find some healing, find some restoration, find better interpretation about what's going on so that I'm not taking up all that space in the room. And I give the people in my life that I care about, my wife, my kids, my friends, the room that they can do the same, right? That they can express what's going on for them. And so I still believe wholeheartedly in all those traits that we talked about from the very beginning. That's absolutely 100% part of our masculine heart and who we are as men. But it's also evolving, and and I want to be able to bring all of that strength in ways that allow the people around me to really grow and feel safe to do so, rather than when I get big, when I get loud. I don't think that too many people feel safe in that environment.
There is so much in what you just shared. I want to probably try to reflect on it through the lens of my own words. And please correct me, please interrupt, please share more if you feel like it. So a few things that I heard you say that, again, I'm reinterpreting in my own way of thinking and speaking. Strength, courage, valor, power, the ability to come through, the ability to carry heavy loads, come through for others. All of those are traits of the masculine heart. That is part of who we are as men. And then I will add, because we are created in the image of God, and those are parts of the character of God. And therefore, that's what we reflect as men. Some of the aspects of his nature that we reflect specifically as men. Now, that masculinity, given our stories, are the violence against us, the neglect against us, the wounds that we have received, our experience of this broken world. As a result of all of that, that masculine heart, masculinity has gone broken. And therefore, what we witness out there is that the strength and the power and the aggression, all those things that are inherently part of who we are as men, are expressed in a broken way. But they were not meant to. That was not the initial design. That was not what God meant. That is not an expression of true masculinity, but of broken masculinity. And therefore, when we operate in that way, what happens to the people around us is that they get small, in your words, that we remove the space for them to be themselves, and we just, bottom line, harm them. But through what you're sharing, I see that you have gone through your own particular journey to receive the restoration of your masculine heart so that you can operate as a man and reflect the image of God in those very ways, with aggression and with strength and with power, but using those things not as the means to show the world that you are a man, or to protect yourself from being exposed, but instead in the service of the people that you love, right? For your wife to be able to have a voice and be heard, and for her to thrive in your home, and for your children to know that they are protected and that they can develop their own strength under your care and become who they are meant to be under your care. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's my desire, right? That's my goal. That's my desire. And, with the help of you guys, I have just an incredible group of friends and brothers that help keep me pointed in that direction, for sure.
The honor is both. You know that is both ways, brother.
Yeah.
So spectacular. I love the way that you unpacked it. I love the way that you described it through the lens of your own story. Back to the original question.
Yeah.
Given who you were and your experience of masculinity, given your journey of broken masculinity and the effect that it had on the people that you love, but also the journey of restoration that you have been going through, how would you define masculinity today? And you can use either what words would you use to describe it, or if you have maybe a sentence or two that would allow me to understand your perception of what the masculine heart is.
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I think it's just really the motive, right? Is where is it all coming from and why? And I think true masculinity is all of those things, and it's in the service of others, not for the protection of my own ego.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm early on, and still can to this day, hopefully not nearly as often or severe, but when it's in the protection of my own ego, I think that's generally when the brokenness comes out. So I would love to be able to bring that strength for the people that I care about, and for strangers, when I can, someone I just met when I can. But I would like to be able to bring that strength on behalf of others. But I have to remove myself. I have to get myself out of the way first in order to do that.
What does that look like? What has that looked like for you? How do you remove yourself? What do you mean by removing yourself, and how do you approach that on a practical way?
In general, I think it's just not. I've had to remove the lens that I look at things through that I had done for most of my life, right? Probably starting at a very young age, and that lens that I looked through the whole, was always scanning for potential threats. And I was able to recently try to set that aside and start to look through a lens of curiosity instead, right? Being curious of why that person may have said those words, why they might have done those things, right? Why the situation is what it is, right? Rather than it just being a reflection of who I am as a man, right? And taking that personally, maybe there's a whole lot more to it than what my ego has to say about it. And
and sometimes even asking yourself, why do I react in this way? Why do I feel so ticked about this thing? Why do I suddenly feel that I went from 2 to 10 in a matter of seconds? Is right to your point of evaluating the threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Being curious not only about others but about yourself, right? When I can ask those questions rather than make statements, right? I think when internally I'm making judgments or statements around what's going on, I think that I'm viewing it through a more narrow lens, and it's really a lens of self-protection, rather than when I'm able to look at it through a lens of curiosity. It's a much wider lens at that point, and a much softer lens.
Less threatening.
Correct.
Sean, if you could go back then and maybe sit down and have a conversation like this with Sean when he was in his maybe 20s or 30s, what would you share with him?
Wow. I'd love that opportunity. To be honest, it could have changed a lot of things. I think it starts maybe not just with the conversation that we just had and the words that we just spoke, but it really maybe begins with understanding where that messaging is coming from and finding a better, a clearer interpretation, a healthier interpretation.
Which messaging are you speaking of?
For me personally, it is your best will never be enough, right? That nobody really, forgive my language, but gives a shit about me.
So
right?
would you mind maybe even shining a little more light on that, Sean? So he's in his 20s, he's in his 30s.
Sure.
He's just fighting. He's just making things work. What is his world? What is his what circumstances is he going through? And then what is his internal world like?
Yeah, through 20s and 30s were mainly mid-20s and 30s were very successful periods of my life from a worldly sense, right? But the messaging that I received even from a very young age is that it's all up to me, right? No one else is going to do it. No one cares what I have to go through, how it turns out. Nobody really gives a crap about me. So if it's going to happen, I need to make it happen. It
sounds, Sean, if I'm honest, that sounds like a lot of what I hear in the media today, even from people who are popular voices in the world today. They're actually telling the next generation, nobody cares about you. No one cares about what you do. What you need to do is to keep striving, work harder. No one gives a damn. So keep at it for your own sake. Just work harder, suck it up, make it work.
Right.
What was that the way that you live life?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And those words were not only assumed, but those words were spoken over me, many times in my life even. And that, that, you control your own destiny. And again, there's a certain element. I'm not saying that, listen, don't wake up tomorrow, sleep in,
Yeah, of course.
give a half-assed effort, and listen, everything's going to be great. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Of course.
But the messaging was, it's entirely up to you. Right.
And you're on your own.
And you're on your own. Right. And coupled for me with your best is never enough. So it's all on me, right? I'm completely responsible, but believing deep down that my best won't be enough. So that's a hell of a pickle to be in. And
so as a result of that messaging, what was your reaction? What would you do then? Work harder, accomplish more?
Accomplish more. Yeah. I tried to accomplish everything I could, right?
Yeah. And you did.
I did. I accomplished a lot of things, but it was really out of brokenness, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I loved, and again, I think this is where it can get confusing, because all of the things that I did, I loved, right? I really loved it. The desire came from just a really pure part of my heart for adventure, for challenge, just all of those things. That's just such a pure part of our heart as men. Very true for me. So I was doing it. That's where it started from. But with this messaging, it became a job. These things became a job, and it became very critical. The success or the outcome became very critical to the final message that I would receive and the final report card that I would receive about who I was as a man, right? If I didn't achieve it, then that messaging is right. So if I finished even second, that messaging was right. My best was never what it just wasn't enough. I didn't try hard enough. Right.
So you always need to the report card, your last sale, you're only as good as your last sale.
Yeah.
Even if you accomplish, you have to go do it again. And if you succeeded, you have to succeed more. And you build this level of a company, you need to build a bigger one. And if you made you accomplish this in sports, you have to do more. And again, what I'm hearing you say is not that accomplishing something in sports is bad. Right. Building a company is not bad. Having tremendous success, none of that is bad. The problem that in what I'm hearing you describe is that it was not about the thing. It was that part of the motive, even though part was very pure and rooted in great desires, part of it was also trying to have a different answer, trying to prove that your best is actually enough, that you are good, that you have what it takes, longing for that recognition that never came. And that's what breaks everything. That's what tears the heart down, breaks it apart, because it will never be enough. It's an endless treadmill. It's an endless race.
Yep. Yeah. It's impossible to find validation in those things. It's very temporary, right? It is
very temporary. And it's external. It's looking for a validation that is coming from things and from people and from accomplishments, instead of from the only place that we can actually receive and understand who we really are, our true identity, and then that we do have what it takes as men, which is God, which is our Father.
Yeah.
And so, Sean, I'm trying to picture this man, young, successful, really strong, has developed this capacity to come through and to accomplish in every one of the endeavors that he's placed into. And on one hand, the desire, on another hand, the sense of fulfillment that I can only imagine came through, each one of those successes, because it's awesome, right? We as men, we want to run and we want to win. And so you're experiencing all of that, which is also additional fuel to keep going. And all of that is amazing. And now the broken part of you that feels that even though you have accomplished all these great things, your best is never enough. Life is up to you. And ultimately, you're on your own, right?
Right.
Now, what would you say to that man? If you could come back and have the conversation with him, you started by saying that it was not, that is more about the motive, that is not about the things themselves, but it's more about the motive. What else would you share with him?
You're not on your own. You're not on your own. You have, our Father, our Heavenly Father, is always there for you, right? There are people in this world that really do care about you as well and have the capacity. Broken people, yes, but there are people here, and I've been able to experience that in the last 6 or 7 years, in ways that I never thought was possible, right? But people do care. You are loved, and you're not on your own, right? And the outcome is not a final report card on who you are as a man, right? The way you show up and the motive behind your actions, I believe, is now the report card of who you are.
Let me try to rephrase that, because I think that that's really important, and I'm hearing that for myself and also for the young me in me. The outcomes are not the report card on who you are. The way that you show up is what matters. Is who are you and how do you choose to show up on a daily basis in everything, right? In life, at work, with your wife, with your children. Mm-hmm. Who do you want to show up as? What is your decision? How do you show up today? That's really what counts. The outcome we don't really have control over.
Absolutely. And I just believe, for me, knowing that I'm cared for, right? Not just useful, but truly cared for who I am. And, I know that I didn't receive that messaging. I don't doubt that my parents and my family and some of my friends cared for me. I just didn't feel cared for, right? I always felt useful, but that's a very lonely place to be as a man, is to simply be useful. And I think that, just talking about masculinity in general, the need to feel cared for is of a masculine trait as well, or a need, I believe, that we have as men, to be cared for, to be respected, to be appreciated, to be lifted up. We need those things. We will walk through doors, right? We will tear down walls. We will do hard things. We will, stand in front of threats to those around us. We'll do all of those things, but I think in order to do that and do it well, we also have to be cared for, or feel cared for and appreciated.
Yeah. And so, Sean, I'm thinking about a couple of groups of people that may be watching this conversation, listening to it. And one of the groups is a group of men who may be in similar places than you or I were a few years ago, longing for finding a path, finding peace in their own hearts, finding joy, finding passion, finding the freedom that you and I have come to experience in our journey. Mm-hmm. What would you say to those men?
I would say that you need community. You need like-hearted men around you, and you need to be willing to commit to that journey at any cost, right? That it is available.
Which journey are you talking about?
I think the journey of restoration, really. I think of, I think it's important. It's super important to be able to excavate and restore. And what that takes is the strength and courage and willingness to do hard things and really begin to address what's really going on and where all that came from. And we don't have to do it on our own, and we shouldn't do it on our own. And I don't think we even can do it on our own. We need other men and other people in our lives that are willing and able to go through that process with us. And that is possible. It is out there. And I don't know that I ever believed that it was out there. I thought, yeah, that sounds great. And I would love that. But I never thought that would be a reality. And I'm standing here today to say that it is a reality. It's a reality in my life. The conversations that I have with my wife today are more fruitful than we've had in the past, right? I have brothers like you and several others that really speak into me, and it's available, and it's not as elusive as I thought it was.
Yeah, so you're not alone. You're not on your own. Find brothers. There is a second group of people that I think could be listening to a conversation like this, and it's I want to say the way that I'm thinking about it: the women who have been on the receiving end of that broken masculinity.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about my wife. And where she was, where we met. She grew up also in a home where her father was very abusive towards her since she was about 3 years old, physically abusive to her. I'm thinking about the abuse that she received from men who were showing their strength as men by wanting stuff from her when she was in her teenage years instead of bringing their strength on her behalf. I'm thinking, so I'm putting myself in the shoes of my mother's experience of men, my wife's earliest experience of men. And therefore, as a result of their experience, what they came to believe masculinity is, the words that they would have used to describe masculinity would have been back then abusive, violent, abusive, violent, toxic, to use current terms. Thank God, in the case of my wife, she also went through her own journey of restoration, and she has witnessed my journey of restoration, just to see that the aggression, strength, and power, and all the masculine traits that we're describing are meant for her sake, not against her, are meant to be a source of strength on her behalf, not a source of violence against her. And therefore, her current view of masculinity is completely different. But I do empathize with the hundreds and thousands and probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of women who have actually have been on the receiving end of broken masculinity. What would you say to them?
They're right. It is broken. I honestly, I can't imagine what it's like for a woman in particular to be on the receiving side of broken masculinity. I think that it's extremely hard for me to put myself in those shoes. I know that obviously as men we're larger, right? We're stronger. That shows up as aggression a lot of times, it can show up as passivity as well, but even that passivity, I think, speaks strongly. And I also believe that one of the things that women desire and need for their heart is safety. And that can't be a very safe place or feel like a very safe place for a woman under those conditions. But I do know that a lot of that stems from on the male side stems from fear. I believe it all starts there, right? Whether it's passivity or aggression, it all starts from a place of fear. It's just a matter of how did we make that work from a young age, and then we doubled down in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so the man that you might be experiencing that in, there's broken portions of that man that if you're willing to stand by him, right, and help him explore those areas, I believe that there's a beautiful restored version of that man that's inside that young boy that you might be experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as men, there's few things that I believe our hearts desire more than to have a woman by our side that can see that in us, right? That can acknowledge the brokenness in us, but see us for who we truly are and who our capacity as that man, truly as a more healed and restored man is, and to help us along that path. Speak into us. Please have patience with us, and help build us up into that person. And to have the belief, to have someone in our life that believes that of us and can speak into us in that way is incredibly powerful. And I know for some that might be a really big ask. It's likely that man, I know I has caused a lot of damage to the relationship through there. So I understand that it's a big ask, but it's in there. It's in there, and I believe it's in every man. And if it's someone you truly care for and love and desire to have a better relationship, a better life with, then there's no greater gift that you can give that man than to try to help him speak into him along that journey.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. The way that I would put it, as I think about it myself, the first thing would, and which I heard you say, was to acknowledge that broken masculinity has caused a lot of harm and to not minimize it. There's been horrors that men have caused because of their broken hearts as men. And so I almost like even reflecting and responding to what you're saying, Sean, on behalf of that group of people or towards that group of people who may have been on the receiving end of that broken masculinity. What I feel that I need to say is I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fair. It should not have happened. There is no excuse for it. And the second part is, which I think you articulated beautifully, is if there are men in your life that you love and that you're committed to, the power that you have through believing in them and seeing past the brokenness into what's truest about each of the men, that capacity to see through and say, but I believe in you because I see the goodness that is on the other side. And I want to invite you to explore that and to do whatever it takes to heal and to restore because I see who you are. I don't think that there is anything that would motivate a man more than a woman that he loves, who believes in him and is willing to say, go get him, go fight for it. I see you and I trust you. So yeah, thank you for that. I think that that's really powerful. Now, if Sean, 10 years from now, were to come and have a conversation with you today, what do you think he would share with you?
Well, what I would like for him to be able to share with me is thank you, right? Thank you for being intentional and for the willingness to explore some difficult and painful topics and really fight for the version of yourself that you know deep down is in there, for who you were created to be. Thank you for fighting for that person, for that young boy. A friend of ours not too long ago gave some really just incredible advice to a young man in our group. And he said, always love the boy inside of you. And they're very simple. They were just very simple words. But man, I walked away from that evening, and that's the one thing that grabbed me more than anything, is always love the boy inside of you.
And for context, we were in the middle of a ceremony of initiation for a young man who was turning 13, and his father put together this gathering of many of us to honor the man, to honor the boy, and then to honor his transition into the beginning of a journey of initiation to become the fullness of who God created him to be as a man. And so each one of the men around the fire had an opportunity to speak words of wisdom to the young man, to the young 13-year-old boy, out of their own journey. And some of those were words that they wished they would have heard when they were 13 and 14 and 15 and throughout their journey of becoming a man. And so the words from this one man to the young boy were, always love the boy inside. Am I right, Sean? Were those the exact words?
Yeah.
And so, keep sharing. So this is what you hope that now 67-year-old Sean would come and tell you, thank you for honoring the boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for going after that young boy inside of you. I mean, my own belief is that in our very early years, right, when we haven't lost our innocence, right, maybe up until 5 or 6 years old, right, where we haven't yet realized that the world can be a dangerous place. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the truest representation of who we were created to be. And I remember actually the very first night that we met, one of the questions around the fire you had asked is, what do you want? And my exact words that night, many years ago, which I was just reminded by the other night, but because of that statement, is that I want to regain my innocence.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to connect again with that young boy inside of me before I realized that the world could be a dangerous place, because I believe that is the truest representation of who I am. And the truest
And I think that then, based on that, is probably the truest definition of masculinity. When we look at a boy acting like a boy before he loses his innocence, that's what masculinity is supposed to be. The strength and the power and the guns and the fighting and the superhero costumes and the adventure and the challenging and the willingness to make a fool of himself and play and dance around and cry when he needs to cry and express that he's afraid when he's afraid. A man as he was supposed to be.
I think so.
That's really good, brother.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great place to take a pause today, and maybe to invite our listeners, especially the men listening or watching to this conversation, and to invite them to connect with those early memories before they came to realize that the world was a dangerous place, before they lost their innocence, so to speak. And what words would you use to describe your heart then as a man? And what would it look like to choose to risk in moving in the direction of recovering that innocence? Finding a group of men with whom they can begin to share the reality of how they're doing, the reality of their hearts and their current condition, the reality of their circumstances, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and make a commitment with each other to chase after God and after the journey of returning to that place of innocence, returning, bringing healing and restoration to their masculine hearts and to the boy in each of them. Thank you, brother. This is awesome. I hope that this is the first of many. Thank you for joining me today. And yeah, much more to explore. The idea is to continue exploring this category of the masculine heart. What is masculinity, and how do we recover true masculinity as a reflection of the image of God? Thank you, Sean.
My pleasure, my man.
Talk to you later, brother.
All right. Love you, man.
Love you, man. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the WILDSONS Podcast. And if you did, I want to invite you to subscribe to it and to share it with anyone in your world that you think could benefit from it. And also to visit us at wildsons.com to learn more about our online workshops and our weekend retreats and events, and to subscribe to WILDSONS Weekly, our free newsletter for those who want to become the men, the husbands, the fathers, the leaders God created them to be. See you next time.